Good morning and welcome back to SLM News with Skylar Vaca and Maribel Rumpf. Breaking news, sugarcane cultivation in the Philippines continues to be a severe problem as children as young as 7 are starving, sick, and underpaid. Child labor has been a huge, tragic continuity that we have been able to see throughout time, and especially within sugarcane factory production in the Philippines. Industrialization is a necessity to any growing country's society and causes advancements socially, culturally, economically, and technologically.
Industrialization in Britain had many incredibly positive effects with increase in production of goods, standard of living, wealth, better housing, healthier diets, job opportunities, inspired innovation, and more. On the other hand, it had harmful, unfortunate effects as well. Child labor greatly increased and families were separated, leaving the children lost and uneducated and in complete inhumane working conditions. Let's take a look at what things really look like for these young children at the time of the Industrial Revolution in Britain.
Now, let's see what things look like today regarding child labor in the Philippines. Yes, an unfortunate story indeed. It's difficult to think that something like child labor during the British Industrial Revolution could be so similar to the working conditions for children in our current world.
Local child labor expert Leah Cohen will join us today in discussing child labor conditions in the Philippines now and how they compare to the working conditions for children during the British Industrial Revolution. Leah, thank you for being with us. Can you speak on the similarities and differences in the work environment?
Thank you for having me. Conditions in the factories and mines for children during the Industrial Revolution were extremely harsh and inhumane. In factories, children were frequently living in cramped, difficult quarters. Work was very dangerous at this time, in tight areas with poor ventilation, toxic metal and dust exposures, and generally unclean and unsafe machinery and other circumstances often resulting in deaths. They also worked in coal mines, crushing and breaking fingers, and were exposed to naked men. Children worked insanely long hours, making an extremely small amount of money. In sugarcane fields, harvesters were exposed to extreme heat for extended periods of time, causing dehydration, headaches, and often chronic kidney disease. They are also at risk to be attacked by venomous animals and are exposed to chemical hazards when the cane is burned. In both jobs, the kids were paid a tiny amount of money for the long, harsh work hours. Many were paid as little as $3.50 for a full 7-hour day in the Philippines, which comes out to about $1,260 per year. And children during the Industrial Revolution were usually paid 50 cents to 60 cents a day. The government mandated wage in the Philippines is around $6, and the average sugarcane worker earns half that, while seasonal workers earn roughly $2.
And what is the type of work that these children would have to endure?
At as little as 6, kids would start out working in sugarcane fields, but at the ripe age of 15 or 16 years, they begin the extremely dangerous work of cutting the physical sugarcane. The job includes cultivating the sugarcane, which is then sent to companies and factories like Coca-Cola. The child's work life has become so normalized in some of these areas, specifically in northern Mindanao, that it is seen as a way of life.
Thank you. Now, I think a bunch of us would like to know what would be so convincing that these kids would put themselves in such a horrible situation.
Although labor was not necessarily forced by the government, an abundance of families are in poverty such that their kids pretty much have no choice but to work in these sugarcane fields. They have to be able to provide for their families, as if they didn't, their families may starve. Now, there are many disadvantages to this. One of the most important ones being that since children are forced to spend their days working, they're not able to receive an education.
So, if this labor is not technically forced, then what is stopping adults from working in place of their children?
During the British Industrial Revolution, factory owners saw children as more manageable, cheaper, and less likely to go on strike. They could hit and abuse the kids without opposition or fighting back. Kids would be dumped into cold water and suffer serious negative effects from this. In factories, children had small hands to fit in machines, and in coal mines, they could get into smaller areas. In general, children could be paid less and were easier to control than adults.
Now, with all this information, I think our viewers would love to know just how similar or different child labor sugarcane cultivation in the Philippines is compared to the same job during the British Industrial
Child
Revolution.
labor today versus industrial Britain has a lot of similarities. The issue of pay, separation of families, working conditions, and education are all similar to the way it was back then. Although wages are slightly different, higher in today's day because of efforts from various organizations to stop child labor, kids are still being paid $3.50 for working a full 7-hour day. Some workers are even paid as little as around $2 a day. This was, of course, an issue in Britain, with families being so poor that the children must work to provide for them, but making so little money that they can still barely afford to eat. In both cases, the working conditions are awful and the work is dangerous, and the child laborers are denied an education because they have to spend their entire day working. They have no ability to become educated and get a higher paying job since they are already in poverty, so they stay at the bottom of the social class structure, struggling to stay alive. Now, on the other hand, child labor has changed and developed a lot, and there are even many efforts from organizations working right now to do as much as they can to stop child labor where it is still occurring. Because of pressure from other countries and groups to end child labor, at least in the Philippines, wages have been forcibly raised by the government, but children still end up being paid half of what they should be, and still are not paid nearly enough. In Britain, there were less protesters and less people who really stood up against child labor because the adults needed the money and the system worked out great for the factory owners. Because the Philippines has industrialized much later than Britain, America, and many others, they are still now utilizing child labor in their country. The issue is, many countries now have laws against child labor and are realizing it is wrong, so organizations have caused a lot of pushback onto places like the Philippines. The Philippine Program Against Child Labor works to totally change the lives of child laborers, their families, and communities towards their sense of self-worth, empowerment, and development.
Thank you so much for your time, Leah Cohen. It seems the consensus is that measures are being taken more than ever to stop dangerous child labor conditions, but it still remains a tremendous problem affecting millions worldwide.
That was SLM News. Thank you for joining us.
In our next story, Elon Musk forfeits Twitter and goes on a retreat to Mars. To be continued.